Our sermon today. A married couple had a quarrel and ended up giving each other the silent treatment. And I'm sure you're aware of the silent treatment. But 2 days into their mute argument, the man realized he needed his wife's help in order to catch a flight to Chicago for a business meeting. He had to get up at 5 a.m. But not wanting to be the first to break the silence, he wrote on a piece of paper, "Please wake me at 5 a.m. She took the paper and nodded in the affirmative. The next morning, the man woke up only to discover his wife was already out of bed, and it was 9 a.m. and he had missed his flight. Now, he was just about to go and tell her off when he noticed the piece of paper on the side of the bed that read, "It's 5 a.m., wake up." Now, I have been on an emotional intelligence journey of getting to know myself on a deeper level, to become more aware of how I am showing up in the world. It is said that awareness is the beginning of transformation, and I believe this wholeheartedly. I've also come to the belief that human beings are defined by the relationships we nurture or the ones we neglect, and that we must wake up. We must be awakened to all that we are. It has been said that how we show up in the world is but a reflection of our inner lives. How we treat others is a reflection of how we feel about ourselves. And we must know ourselves. St. Paul in 1 Corinthians says, "For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known." There's a well-known passage in the Bible that reads, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." We all know this passage. It's the golden rule, the maxim of reciprocity. That is to treat others as you yourself would want to be treated. Love others as you would want to be loved. Personally, I think this is an outdated concept, one that doesn't fit really well with what we know about modern evolved society. And I think you may have heard me say it before. I feel that we should be more open to the concept of the platinum rule rather than the golden rule. The platinum rule asserts, "Do unto me as I want to be done unto. Love me as I want to be loved. Treat others as they want to be treated. Love them as they would want to be loved." The emphasis here is not on someone else deciding how I should be treated, loved, etc. In the latter, I have agency in how I want to be treated. This is an important distinction between the two. And besides that, there are people in our world today who abuse, mistreat, and literally loathe themselves. And if they do unto you and me as the golden rule prescribes, like they do unto themselves, we just might be in a world of trouble. Can I get an amen? If we let others decide how they will love us, treat us, respect us, then they will never truly know us as we are and want to be known. And this can set up for some very abusive situations. As a minister, I get to see up close how many people really dislike themselves. Some hate their own lives, their bodies, their emotional conscious states of being. The toxic shame that is embedded in self-loathing can be a deeply painful experience for the individual and the people around them. Blogger Althea Luna advises her readers to stay off social media as it tends to reinforce self-loathing through a phenomenon known as toxic comparison, which I believe is related to the feelings of the discontent that people have about their own lives. When we go on social media, we see a finely curated version of other people's lives. We see what they want us to see, not what is actually going on under the surface, and we compare our lives to those picture-perfect versions of other people's realities. And then we become self-critical. We fill up our lives with this negativity, and it shuts down our ability to provide and be a space for ourselves and for others. And I will say more about this later. I recall counseling with an individual who indicated that she often resorts to cutting herself. She conveyed that the emotional pain that she regularly endures can at times be so intense and debilitating that cutting to the point of drawing a significant amount of blood is the only thing that brings immediate psychological release. Another individual suffered liver failure from years of heavy alcohol use in an effort, as he told me, to dull the pain related to his childhood trauma. Stories like these reveal the reality of the human condition. None of us are exempt from the trials and troubles of life, but for some of us, life is truly a heavy burden. In our nation, there's not many among us, rather, who are fully content, or shall I say, genuinely happy. And it really doesn't matter if one is rich or poor. There is plenty of scientific evidence out there that conveys the truth that some rich folk are truly miserable, while some poor folks are indeed genuinely content. I have wondered whether the recent breakdowns in our society are related to individuals disliking themselves or their lives to the degree that it makes it easier for them to dislike or even hate their neighbors and fellow citizens. I don't believe that I am overstating the importance of the notion that one cannot fully, or shall I say correctly, love another if there is no pure, unadulterated love for oneself. And I'll repeat that one cannot fully or correctly love another if there is no pure, unadulterated love for oneself. Author and physician Dean Ornish, in his book, Love and Survival, contends, quote, "Our survival depends on the healing power of love, intimacy, and relationships, physically, emotionally, spiritually, as individuals, as communities, as a country, as a culture, perhaps even as a species," end quote. Such feelings charge up our dopamine, our neurotransmitter, to our reward system. It can make us feel alive and charged up. And if we've ever, as a species, needed to be charged up in love, we need it now. I'm aware that for some of us, learning to love oneself is quite a challenge. The reality is, no, we are not the people we used to be or the people we may want to become. Maybe we have a poor self-image due to some childhood trauma, or we've been told by someone that we would never amount to anything, that our black skin means less, or that we cannot do a thing because of our gender. And surely we know that a rigid theology that teaches us that we are all born of sin and worthy of death is not helpful when it comes to loving oneself. I've had a few discussions with some of my most ardent Christian relatives about the nature of sin, hell, and a whole plethora of other issues related to popular culture. One conversation stands out. It was a conversation about Christian morality and how most truly religious folk don't curse, steal, hurt others, commit adultery, or any other of the major sins and transgressions. I somehow personally don't know any of these people. Do you? But if some claim such piety, let's just take them at their word and run with it. However, this particular person emphatically proclaimed his religious piety, indicating that he doesn't do any of these things. But knowing what I knew of this individual, I quickly remarked, "No, I don't see you doing any of these things, but you just pay Hollywood to do it for you." He stood there silently, obviously weighing the truth of my words. You see, this person is a movie fanatic. And in his movie watching, with all the images and the stories, he does get to cuss, fight, and all the other vices that he can't do in his quote unquote real life. He lives vicariously through the big screen. And the moment I said it, he knew it was true. This is many of us. Our lives, intimate relationships over time will likely become stale. We lose hair, we gain weight, we get wrinkles, we become a shell of our former selves. Our realities can become mundane, monotonous, pointless, and yes, we may long to escape them. Some of us escape the mundane existence of our everyday lives by living vicariously through the lives of others. The images from social media, books, magazines, and of course, the movies we watch. And let's consider the imaginary world of cinema. We do get to experience, to feel, and to become someone else, if only for an hour or so. And while we may think that it is mere entertainment, our bodies actually go through physiological and emotional changes during these times. Passions are stoked. We laugh, we cry, we become sensually aroused and engaged. We fall in and out of love, or we discover love anew. In our momentary escapes, we experience the privilege, the power, and the prestige of becoming super wealthy overnight. We get to tell off our boss, quit our jobs, and fly into the sunset to some faraway island paradise. We get to become the superheroes, able to do the impossible, like destroying all of our enemies and saving the universe in a galactic fashion. Living vicariously through someone else's experience is a struggle of the ego. Eckhart Tolle conveys in his book, The Power of Now, that it is the ego which is vulnerable, insecure, and ever seeking new things and experiences to identify with, to give to it the feeling that it exists or is alive. We long for the feeling of being alive once again. And it doesn't matter if it happens in a world of fantasy, but too often we allow these false feelings from the fantasy to exist in our current realities, which can have detrimental effects on our personal relationships and can even result in conflict in the community. Can I get a witness? I contend that people don't really have a need to be superheroes. People are in need and looking for love and acceptance. And not to sound like a cliche, but love is indeed all we need. We must be awakened to the understanding that love is innate in us and ever present. Tolle talks about love as a state of being. He says, quote, "Your love is not outside of you. It is deep within you. You can never lose it, and it cannot leave you. It is not dependent on some other body, some external form. And love is not selective, just as the light of the sun is not selective. We are able to feel and share this intense love. It is not stemming from other people. It is coming from us. We just need to cultivate, activate, and demonstrate it more." And there are certain people who are able to reflect our love back to us more intensely than others. Philosopher and poet Khalil Gibran once uttered, "Love, it surrounds every being and extends slowly to embrace all that shall be." He also said that when you love, you should not say, "God is in my heart," but rather, "I am in the heart of God." There are mirror neurons in our brains that cause us to absorb the space that others provide for us, then reflect back to us what we shared. And others do the same when we provide a non-judgmental reflective space without our presuppositions, our fears, or our prejudices, our stereotypes, and our narratives. This is how relationships can work. And this is how society should work. In some of my relationship work with couples, usually right off the bat, one partner will start telling me what they want me to fix about the other partner. It goes without saying. I then usually will ask the complaining partner to look inwardly and identify and examine their own stuff. I seldom will address the relationship itself as much as I do the individual's view of the self within the relationship. When conflict takes place, I contend that it is often not that we actually dislike our partners or have a problem with them or those with whom we are in conflict with. What often happens is one person's feelings are overwhelmingly negative about themselves. And this is what is being reflected back to them in their interaction. I usually notice that one or both partners have what I describe as crowded or closed off spaces within themselves that no longer provide a clearing for their partner to reflect. And I recognize that some of this might be the result of past resentment or stem from some past hurt, traumas, or indiscretion. But when we don't provide the space for our partner to reflect the best part of their nature, a breakdown often happens as the partner, unable to release, no longer likes the insecure, fearful, or angry person they have become when they are interacting with the other individual. This is how some affairs can happen. Something new comes along, someone else creates the space for us to reflect the part of us that we want to experience in ourselves, and suddenly we feel awakened. Our senses, our bodies, and our minds feel alive again. But we can experience ourselves and another person positively within a relationship by having a reserved and uncrowded space for them. We want the who-ness or whatness of our beings reflected back onto us. Ultimately, this is what we are hungry for. And while we are not supernatural by any means, we can see miraculous results from our relationships with others when there is a non-judgmental space in our lives available for them. This is how it works. I hold space for you to reflect off of me, and you hold space for me to reflect what I need. We do this by being fully present, non-judging, forgiving, understanding, and patient. We've all been in dialogue with people who dominated the conversation the entire time, or those whose personalities consumed all the space in the room. We weren't able to get a word in edgewise. They left their time with us feeling great and heard because they were able to consume all the space between us, reflecting what they needed, but not allowing anyone else to share. Your experience of them has left you now wanting to avoid them in the future. They felt heard, you felt manipulated by them when they took your time and attention without you being able to reflect yourself. It's not that you didn't like them, you just didn't like who you were when you were with them, or you didn't like the feelings that they made you feel when you were with them. See, I know this because I'm a really big personality. And when I enter a room with another big personality and they consume me, I can feel really small. So I know I got some big personalities in our room right now when you're not able to be yourself in a situation because someone else is crowding your space, you can leave that environment feeling really small and unfulfilled. This is what we have been witnessing in our society, a bunch of people with crowded spaces and crowded lives in conflict, and few actually hearing, seeing, and affirming the other. Creating space means that others can be their whole selves instead of too much of you or too much of me showing up and consuming the air. Sharing this created space equitably helps all parties to enjoy the interaction, to feel heard and accepted. Ultimately, people will like you more when you provide space for them. My daughter once asked me why I thought that she liked quote unquote thuggish boys and the ghetto life, even though she wasn't raised like that. I told her that in her everyday life, she doesn't feel valued, connected, or strong. And with them, she felt seen and got to play a tough girl role where she is strong and unafraid. And she marveled at the answer, inquiring of the nature of my insight into her personhood. I said, girl, because I raised you, I know you. I'm a little older. Maya Angelou once said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Unquote. As creatures of habit, we will seek out people, situations, communities that allow for us to be the people we enjoy or prefer being. Thus the phrase, birds of a feather flock together. The people or communities that make us laugh, that make us feel good about who we are, that enable us to express our best selves are the ones we will choose to be in and with. Think about who we want to be as a religious community and why people may or would choose to worship with us or not. And the same principle, unfortunately, works just as well in negative communities and relationships. where people may find acceptance, like my daughter, for instance. We also have seen this with the rise of certain groups in our nation that thrive on negative and destructive energy. Even when we say negative things about ourselves and our lives, there can be a domino effect because healthy people don't want to provide a space for constant negative energy. The people we interface or interact with will subconsciously feel our negativity and may start mirroring or internalizing our negative behavior and thoughts as their own. Beware not to provide your healthy space for negative energy to set in. We can observe it, even try to understand it, while not allowing ourselves to be affected by it as much as we are able. We must continue to create these clearing spaces. Let it become a spiritual practice. You know, I had this young man that moved here, and he didn't know anyone, and so I befriended him on one of our hikes, and he ended up hanging out with us, my partner and I, and he said, I feel so comfortable around you guys. I can just tell you everything and everything. He started talking about his life and sharing things, and he said, I don't know why. I don't normally tell people these things. And I realized that, you heard this before, that you created space for them. So people tell you things that they wouldn't tell anyone else. I'm sure you've heard that before. The key is by striving to be fully present and being awakened, aware, cognizant of the space we create for ourselves and for others that enable us to experience a sense of renewal. So try it yourself. First, remember that in most situations, social situations, we are competitive by nature, we're critical by nature, and we're judgmental. Even advice giving is a form of one-upmanship. It may not be easy to find, but I want you to think about this. But hopefully you can bring to mind a moment when a friend, when you were with a friend and there was no competition or judgment at all. If you can think of this, as you recall this person's presence, do you notice your guard been letting down? Do you notice the space that you created for them? Can you recognize and see how they responded and how you responded? Can you see the moment that you created something that was lasting and sustaining? Try to think about that. This season is a time of renewal, of awakening, and of hope. Christendom has just celebrated an awakening last week with Easter. And as we see nature all around us, at least in this hemisphere, awakening from its winter slumber. And after a very tumultuous and challenging year, leading to hopefully a less traumatic year, we need to come to the realization that we too must awaken to new ways of being. And I want to encourage you to think about creating space for people. We must start to cultivate new ways of walking through life for our relationships and communities to be strong and connected. We need to create conditions that can transform us, conditions that empower people to move in a world with confidence, to walk through life with a sense of being wanted by others and by life. We must create and reserve space in our lives, first for ourselves. And this is where we take the time to connect with ourselves spiritually and emotionally. And this may be in the form of meditation, prayer, nature walks, and so on. But it's about being intentional about this time that we take for ourselves, that we create for ourselves. Because if you don't take that wholesome, restorative, renewing time for you, how will you then have some wholesome, restorative, renewing time for me or for that special someone in your life and for others? We must become empty, brave, and safe places where people can come and find renewal, rest, and acceptance. And perhaps they will be able to learn to love themselves fully. They must find in us an available emptiness, which allows them the liberty to explore aspects of themselves that are freeing, loving, and self-affirming. I'm encouraging all of us during this time of awakening to find in yourself this a spirit of renewal, knowing that you are the perfect expression and conscious awareness of the divine source, and that we all are part of a thriving, brilliant, universal web that connects all that is. I want to encourage you all. Let us awaken to all that we are this day and every day. May it be so. Amen.